of fear, all envy, all temptation, all the work of Satan, the counsel of wicked men, and the rising up of enemies, hidden and manifest. Take them away from us and from our people, and from this holy place that is yours. But those things which are good and profitable do provide for us. For it is you who have given us the authority to tread on serpents and scorpions, and upon all the power of the enemy. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. In the grace, compassion, and love of mankind of your only begotten Son, our Lord, God, and Savior Jesus Christ. Through him the glory, the honor, the dominion, and the adoration are due unto you. With him and the Holy Spirit, the Lord life-giver, who is of one essence with you, now and at all times, unto the ages of all ages. Amen. Psalm 50. Have mercy upon me, O God, according to your great mercy, and according to the multitude of your compassions. Blot out my iniquity. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity, and cleanse me from my sin. For I am conscious of my iniquity, and my sin is at all times before me. Against you only I have sinned and done evil before you, that you may be just in your sayings and murder come when you are judged. For behold, thou hast conceived iniquities, and in sins my mother conceived me. For behold, you have loved the truth, you have manifested to me the hidden unrevealed things of wisdom. You shall sprinkle me with your hyssop, and I shall be purified. You shall wash me, and I shall be made whiter than snow. You shall make me to gladness and joy, the humble bones shall rejoice. Turn away your face from my sins, and blot out all my iniquities. Renew me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit in my inward parts. Do not cast me away from your face, and do not remove the Holy Spirit from me. Give me the joy of your salvation, and uphold me with the directing spirit. Then I shall see the chance. Deliver me from blood, O God, the God of my salvation, and my tongue shall rejoice in your righteousness. O Lord, you shall open my lips, and my mouth shall declare your praise. For if you desire sacrifice, I would have given it. You do not take pleasure in burnt offering. The sacrifice of God is a broken spirit. A broken and humble heart God shall not despise. Do good, O Lord, and do good in your pleasure to Zion. And let the walls of Jerusalem be built, and they shall be pleased with sacrifices of righteousness, offering burnt sacrifices. They shall have a cause upon the altar. Alleluia.
Conclusion of every hour.
Have mercy on us, O God, and have mercy on us. Who at all times and every hour in heaven and earth are worshipped and glorified. Christ our God, the good long suffering, the abundant mercy, the great compassion, who loves the righteous and has mercy on sinners, of whom I am chief, who does not wish the death of the sinner, but rather he returns and lives, who calls all salvation for the goodness blessings to come. Lord, receive our prayers and sign of your These are life and guidance for the commandments, sanctify our spirits, cleanse our bodies, conduct our thoughts, purify attention, heal our diseases, forgive us our sins, deliver us from every evil, grief, and distress of heart. Surround us by your holy angels, by the camp, and may guard and guide. And to name your faith, knowledge of your himself and honor for glory, for us forever and ever. Amen.
Make us worthy to pray thankfully. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Hi everyone. So today we're going to start off with a summary of First Kings, and I'm going to take you through the first 8 books. Next. Okay, so the book starts off with telling us that King David is very old, and this is important because the kingdom is soon going to need a new king. So because he's so old, his servants bring him a young woman named Abishag to take care of him. And meanwhile, his son Adonijah starts publicly proclaiming that he's going to become the next king, even though King David already said that Solomon would be the next king. And he starts rallying supporters, and he doesn't tell his family or anybody that might try to stop him. But Nathan the prophet finds out, and because he's righteous and wants to do the right thing, he tells Bathsheba, David's wife, and also Solomon's mother. And she tells David, and then Nathan kind of backs up the story, and they tell her about what Adonijah did. And they also remind him that he promised that Solomon would be the next king. Next slide. So, because of this, David decides to immediately have Solomon anointed, and the entire city rejoices so much that the city shakes. And Adonijah begins to fear for his life because he went against the king. And so he holds on to the horns of the altar so that Solomon can't kill him. But Solomon says that he won't kill him under one condition. And in this verse, 1 Kings 1:52, it says, Then Solomon said, If he proves himself a worthy man, not one hair of him shall fall to the earth, but if wickedness is found in him, he shall die. Next slide. So in chapter 2, David knows that he's going to die soon, so he gives Solomon some final wisdom and advice on obeying God so that his reign will be prosperous. And then David dies and Solomon starts ruling, and Adonijah decides to ask Bathsheba for Abishag's hand in marriage. Remember, she was the person who was taking care of David. And Solomon sees this as him trying to get to the throne, so he has him executed. And then he also exiles and executes a few other people that King David wanted to be punished for things that they did against him. So at the beginning of chapter 3, King Solomon gets married to Pharaoh's daughter and he brings her home with him. And then in his joy, he goes to Gibeon, which at the time is the most important place to worship because they haven't built the temple yet. And he offers 1,000 burnt offerings at the altar. And he spends the night there, and God appears to him in a dream, and he offers him anything he wants. And as you can imagine, a lot of other people would wish for riches or a long life or honor. But Solomon admits that he doesn't really know how to rule, and so he asks God to give him wisdom. And God blesses him by giving him wisdom and all these other great things that he didn't ask for because he was humble. And then Solomon goes back to Jerusalem and he offers more sacrifices and holds a feast for all of his servants. And then we just have a video that shows Solomon's wisdom.
famous monarchs. He was the son of King David. He was renowned for being a just and wise king. It is said that there has never been a king as wise as Solomon. One of the roles of the king of Israel was to serve as the supreme judge. He had to rule on a wide variety of issues and contentions. Using his intellect and logical reasoning, he could sort out the most difficult conflicts between his subjects. One day, two women came to court. One of them claimed that the other had stolen her son. She said that they both live under the same roof and that they both gave birth in the same week. But one night, one of the mothers woke up and her son was dead. Desperate, she made a terrible decision. While her roommate was asleep, she decided to exchange her dead baby for the other mother's child. In front of the king, the other mother claimed that everything that woman said was a lie, and that she only wanted to steal her child. In a decision that surprised everyone, Solomon ordered his guards to take the baby and cut him in half. That way, they would both get their respective half. The guard raised his sword. Right before the blow that would split the child, one of the mothers knelt at Solomon's feet. She pleaded not to kill the baby and to give it to the other woman, who seemed not to care about the child's safety. Solomon clearly understood who the real mother was. Accordingly, the child was handed over to her. This famous event showed the people of Israel how great the king was, for he had God's wisdom.
Okay, Mia, Raba, and then that, home. You must say thou. Yes, go ahead. Listen to her, and I will ask you after. Go ahead.
These two ladies came to Solomon, asking, no, telling him, "This is my baby," fighting over the baby. And Solomon said, "Okay, I'll split the baby in half to see, and then you guys can take each half." And one of the ladies said, "Okay." The other said no. And the one who said no was the baby's actual mom. She said no because she didn't want to see the baby getting cut in half. So she just said, "You can have her." And it shows how wise Solomon is.
Did you get it? Got it? I think you should. Okay, Teresa, mom. يا ولاد, did you get? طيب, okay. Okay, حبيبي.
Thank you for the summary. That was really good. Okay, so in chapter 4, we're given a list of all of King Solomon's officials, and the country was divided into 12 districts, and each district has its own governor. And we're told about how great the kingdom was doing while Solomon was ruling, because the people were safe, they had more than enough more than enough food and more. And because Solomon was so wise, the wisest man at the time, people would come from far and wide to hear him talk about many different topics. So in these verses, we can see, like we're told that God gave Solomon wisdom and exceedingly great understanding and largeness of heart. He was wiser than all men. He spoke 3,000 proverbs. His songs were 1,005, and that men of all nations would come from all over the world just to hear him talk. So what building was King Solomon responsible for building? We have some pictures. So in chapter 5, King Solomon reaches out to King Hiram of Tyre, and he was a friend of David's. And he proposes that Hiram will supply Solomon with the wood for the temple, and then Solomon will pay the servants as much as Hiram wants. So King Hiram is really happy when he receives this letter, and he says, "Blessed be the Lord this day, for he has given David a wise son over this great people." And King Hiram agrees to supply the cedar, but he changes the conditions a little bit, and he asks that Solomon provide food for his household. Solomon agrees, and they create a treaty. So in chapter 6, we're told all of the details for the temple, and Solomon takes 7 years to build it. So in his 11th year, he's all done. And while he's building the temple, God appears to him and says, "Concerning this temple which you are building, if you walk in my statutes, execute my judgments, keep all my commandments, and walk in them, then I will perform my word with you, which I spoke to your father David, and I will dwell among the children of Israel and will not forsake my people Israel." So in chapter 7, we're told that King Solomon starts building his palace, and it takes him 13 years, and all the details are also described in this chapter. And Solomon has King Hiram of Tyre come and build 2 pillars for the temple, and the rest of the chapter describes all of the final details for the temple, and the project is completed. So does anybody know what this is called?
$500 wives. هو ما سمعش السؤال. He didn't hear the question. What object? And anyone knows about?
Isn't that the Ark Covenant?
Yeah, the Ark of the Covenant. So in chapter 8, the Ark of the Covenant is brought into the temple, and King Solomon gives a speech about how his father always wanted to build the temple, and he completed his final wish. And Solomon then says a really long prayer, asking God to be with the people in the temple, forgive them when they sin, and hear their prayers. And he kneels down and blesses the people, urging them to obey God. And finally, he offers sacrifices to God and holds a feast for 14 days, and all of the people go home very joyful and thankful for all that God has done for them. And that's it for my chapters.
So what did he do?
Oh, he built the temple.
See, he built the temple, حبايبي. What happened after building it, يا أولاد? What happened?
He asked God, like he prayed to God. He prayed to God to many people to get in, and to different countries, different people from any country to come in and see how everything's in the church and maybe believe.
good. So he prayed to God, and God actually appeared for him in the temple. God filled the place with his glory. And you know what? God was very happy because he finished building his temple. Are we building our house here, our home, our church here, or no? What did you say? We're raising, but yeah, bravo, Alik. But we are going to. The house will be built, God willing. Who cares? Yeah, we will. Habibi, God is very happy to see people's heart toward building his home and looking after that. Did you ever read the book of Haggai? Do you know the book of Haggai, Habibi? Anyone knows that book? Haggai? Haggai, 2 chapters. When you go home, try to read it. 2 chapters. The book of Haggai also talks about how God loves to see his house is built and nice, right? Okay, Habibi.
Okay, I'm doing chapter 9 to 15, starting with chapter 9. So in chapter 9, God promises Solomon that his descendants will reign forever if they keep God's commandments, which is like kind of explained in Psalm 131, which you can read when you get home. And Solomon also makes a truce with the king of Tyre. Does anyone remember what his name is? Because we just talked about this in the last chapter, the king of Tyre.
Anyone knows the name, Habibi, of that king? Yeah.
No, it's okay. The name of the king of Tyre, we just talked about him. It's Hiram. It's Hiram, guys. That's his name. Next slide, please. Chapter 10. By trading and taxes, Solomon becomes the richest king in the world. So a bunch of kings and queens try to visit him, including the Queen of Sheba. She comes to test his knowledge, and she's really amazed by his wisdom. Does anyone know where the Queen of Sheba is from? Yeah, I think. Yeah. All our parents tell us that growing up. So she came riding a camel, and she brought spices and 120 talents of gold for Solomon. Does this remind you of anybody from the Old and the New Testament? Riding a camel, gold and spices? No,
Camel.
I wasn't.
Yeah,
I
what?
wasn't thinking Jesus. You know?
As man.
No. Well, no, it does, but that's actually not what I was thinking of. But like, okay. Well, that's like when,
That's what he said. Be sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
but that's close. But I was actually thinking,
Habibi, listen.
I was
ya
thinking
ولاد.
of Rebecca in Genesis 26, because she visits Isaac riding a camel, and it's like the same type, like because they both represent Christ in the church, typologically. Okay. And also, Mary Magdalene brought spices to the tomb of Christ. So Solomon literally has so much gold that everything in his house is plated with gold, including his forks and spoons, which is crazy.
Habibi started to be loud. Ya ولاد, ya ولاد.
Can we please listen to what she's saying?
That's actually really close, to be honest. Okay. Chapter 11, next slide. Oh. Solomon had one major issue, though. He really loved women. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines, which meant 1,000 women in total who lived in his house. And they were mostly foreign princesses. So when he got older, he abandoned God and started worshiping his wives' gods and building altars for them. So God told him that he will divide his kingdom in two after he dies. God sent the prophet Ahijah to Solomon's servant's son, whose name was Jeroboam, and told him that he would become king of 10 tribes, and Solomon's own son would only become king of 2 tribes, for the sake of God's promise to David. Solomon reigned for 40 years like David, and then he died During Solomon's reign, Jeroboam went to Egypt because he was kind of scared, and he got a wife from Egypt who's a princess. So after Solomon died, he went back to Israel. This is the last chapter about Solomon, but he wrote other books like Wisdom, Song of Solomon, and Ecclesiastes. And we read in these books that Solomon actually repented at the end of his life. Chapter 12, we have a video.
Before we start with the video, I have some questions for you. Focus. Okay, is it only 700? Is it only 700? Huh? Is that right?
Yeah, 700 and 300.
Okay. Habaib did 700 plus 300 comes to eight. Okay. Okay, Habaib. What else do you have here? Any questions for them?
What animal did the Queen of Sheba ride when she was visiting Solomon?
Camel, yes, okay, camel. The Queen of Sheba. Who was the next, the one after Solomon, Habibi? Who was the king after? How many try? Huh? After the King Solomon.
Okay.
Okay, but do you know the queen, the king? Yeah. Jeroboam? Two tribes. Okay, اجري الولد ده كمان مش عارفة اسمه. Not when we have big questions. خد حبيب. خلاص. Okay, طب anyone خلاص حبيب. Good. Anything else you want to ask?
His son, Rehoboam.
حبايبي focus يا ولاد.
King now. So, how's everything going?
Not so good. Listen, you worked hard for your father. Lots of taxes and forces.
Are there subtitles?
Hello. Yay, I'm the king now. So, how's everything going?
Not so good. Listen, you worked hard for your father. He made us pay lots of taxes and forced us to work building his palaces. Please give us some rest and we'll be willing to serve you.
I'll tell you what. Give me 3 days, think it over, then come back.
King Rehoboam decided to talk it over with the same man who gave his father, King Solomon, wise advice.
So what should I do? How do you think I should answer the people?
You will be a servant to the people. Have compassion and work things out with them. They'll end up doing anything for you. Yes, Your Majesty, that would be the wise thing to do.
Hey, I'm not sure you guys are right. After all, you guys are old. What do you guys think? Should I lighten up on the people? Now tell me what you really think. After all, we've grown up together.
Forget about what those old geezers told me.
Yeah, people are just being a bunch of whiners. Hey, I know what you should tell them my finger.
And then you should say, my dad hit you with whips, but I'll beat you up with chains. That'll show him who's king.
You guys are right. Those old guys don't even know what they're talking about.
3 days later, Jeroboam and the people have to say.
Hey, if you think my dad worked you hard, you haven't seen half of it. My dad hit you with whips, but I'll beat you up with chains. What do you think about that?
Get lost, King Rehoboam. We've had it with you.
Go ahead, go. What do I care?
Because King Rehoboam didn't listen to the wise advice of his leaders, the kingdom of Israel was split in half. Instead of ruling over all of Israel, as his father Solomon did, King Rehoboam only ruled over the towns of Judah. The rest of the tribes went with Jeroboam, and he ruled over them.
Someone will say the story clear, please. What did you understand from that? Clear? Yeah, okay. Someone heard it, and can you tell us what happened? Yeah. Did you hear it, George? Can you tell them what is it, حبيبي? No? طب أنت يا واد يا
Okay.
حبايبي, listen يا ولاد. Listen.
So the people came to King Rehoboam, asking him to lighten the wages and the taxes so they can have a little more rest. They can have more rest. So King Rehoboam, he told him to wait 3 days. So he went to counsel with some people, and the older people who helped his father before, they told him that yes, you should lighten the wages, but his friend told him that they're just whining and to put more pressure on them and make the taxes higher. And he thought it was a good idea to listen to his friends. So he listened to his friends and told the people. And then after the kingdom of Israel got split into two, and he got the southern half, Judah, and then the rest of Israel was with Jeroboam.
Great, Yusuf. Anyway, حبايبي. So, what happened when he first started to rule after his father? The son of Solomon. What happened? Was he as wise as his father? What did he do? He was confused what to do. What happened? Huh? What? Split? No. What, he went to ask his friends, asking them what to do, and their friends told him, huh? Okay, okay. First, the people wanted him to be easy on them in paying the taxes and stuff like that. And his friends told him not to do that and be harsh on the people. And the elder people, they told him, no, be gentle on them. But he listens to his friends. Was it a good idea to go to your friend asking their opinion about anything in your life? Why? They have no wisdom. Your friends is as good as you are, and that's what happened. They told him not to listen to the people and do otherwise differently. And by doing this way, he lost the 10 of the tribes, and he was only king on 2 only. Okay, so that's the story.
So now the kingdom is divided into two, with Israel in the north with 10 tribes, and Judah and Benjamin in the south. Jeroboam is king over Israel, and Rehoboam is king over Judah. But Jerusalem is in Judah, which means the people in the northern Israel would have to go up there in order to offer sacrifices to God. But Jeroboam did not want people going to Jerusalem because he was scared they would turn over to Rehoboam. So he built 2 golden calves instead so the people could worship it instead of going to Jerusalem. Does that sound familiar? Building calves for people to worship golden calves?
Remember the calf, Yehuda?
Okay, yeah.
Where is it from?
Yeah. It reminds us of Moses. Next slide. Thank you. Chapter 13 is a bit different from the rest of the chapters, but because of time, we won't be going over it. It's pretty interesting, has a good moral message, but you can read it at home. Next slide, please. Rehoboam is also a bad king in Judah, and he builds altars for idols. In the 5th year of his reign, Shishak, the king of Egypt, raided Jerusalem and took all the gold treasures from the temple and the king's house and from the armory. Because in Solomon's reign, even the soldiers' gear was gold. So all the gold that Solomon collected for years was taken by the Egyptians. War was continuous between Jeroboam and Rehoboam until Rehoboam died and Abijam, his son, took his place. Next slide. Abijam was sinful and idolatrous like Rehoboam, his father, but God let him be king because of the promise he made with David, his grandfather. He also warred with Jeroboam until he died. Then Asa, his son, took his place. Asa is a great king like David, and he bans the idolatry started with Rehoboam because, like, basically, Rehoboam made idols and worshipped them on hills and under trees, and he started a lot of cultish practices, but Asa bans them. And he also makes a truce with the city of Damascus and wars against Israel successfully. Next slide. Here are the Israelite kings. After Jeroboam died, Nadab, his son, became king. And Nadab was also bad in the sight of God, like his father. But Baasha, the son of Ahijah the prophet, conspired against Jeroboam and killed Nadab, making himself king. During his reign, he killed everyone in Jeroboam's family according to the prophecy in chapter 13. Baasha was also evil in the sight of the Lord. Does anyone have any questions? I've done my chapters. That's good.
Habibi, did you notice, يا أولاد? Now we speak about Israelites, the king, and we go back to the North Kingdom. North Kingdom, it's where they have the 10 tribes. طبعا محدش انت بقى وحظك صحصحي.
Hey everyone, so my chapters are a little crazy, so please bear with me, okay? So in chapter 17, we get introduced to a new person. So this person most of us know about, and his name is Elijah the Tishbite. Okay, so everyone knows who Elijah is, right?
You know Elijah? No. Who's Elijah? What do you know about Elijah before we start? Huh? Elijah or Elijah? Go ahead, Yusuf, say, oh no, that's a Tishbite. Prophet. You read about him more here. Listen to him. It's a big prophet, Elijah. Listen.
Okay, so like you said, Elijah is a prophet, but I have something very interesting to tell you about. So Elijah, you know, the name itself means Jehovah is my God, and Tishbite means stranger. So it's kind of funny and ironic because, you know, his name actually describes his purpose as a prophet. He's one of the only people that believe in God that are left in Israel and Judah, you know, one of the only people, because now everyone's corrupted by idolatry. So that's just something, you know, I thought I'd like to share with you. So the chapter starts with Elijah going to Ahab, and he's telling Ahab, you know, God's going to close the sky and there's going to be no rain for years. So obviously this is bad because this is causing drought, and drought equals starvation. So that's not good for the people. After this, God tells Elijah, you know, to leave that place and to go and like hide by this place named Brook Cherith, where God will provide him water, and every single day God will send him ravens to give him food, and, well, the food specifically is bread and meat. So this is really interesting because we see here that God provides for his followers. And while Elijah was there, you know, he ate from the ravens. And do you guys know what's so weird about that?
Because usually, like, ravens take the food and not give you the food.
Yeah, that's true. They're going against their nature to follow God's commandment. But something else I was going to point to was that, you know, in the Mosaic law, you know, in Leviticus, it says that, you know, the ravens are an unclean animals, right? Unclean birds. So the Jews cannot eat anything provided by them. But Elijah, you know, here, he eats not from the ravens, but from God. So we need to notice that sometimes the blessings that we get aren't just like there, you know, they're directly from God. Okay, so Elijah spends some time by the brook, and after a while, God tells him, you know what, leave this brook, and you're going to go to this town called Zarephath. And in this town, you're going to find this widow, and she's going to provide for you. So he goes to the town, and he finds this widow, and he's telling her, can you please get me a cup of water? She does so, and then he's like, can you please make me some bread? So does anyone know this story? Very, very common story. Does anyone want to share the story?
I believe this is like the one, like he goes to the widow and then he asks her for like a piece of like bread or like cake, and she said she doesn't have enough like ingredients for her to make for the three of them, because
Oil
she
and
also
flour.
had flour, and she just basically said that there's not enough for like the three of us, because she also had a son. And then she's like, me and my son are gonna have one each, and then we're just gonna die. But he still asked for one, and then she made one for him. And then like the miracle that happened was that they had they never ran out of any like flour ever, so they were just still living.
Yeah, that's right. So their jars of oil and flour never run out. And this is, it's a really great miracle. And the widow here represents the new covenant church, because although she like started out as a Gentile, right? She wasn't from Israel. She was from Zarephath, which was a town in Sidon. In the end, she showed that she's a God-loving person, and was very generous. And that's why she got the miracle. So Elijah spends some time with them. He stays with them for a couple days. And then the widow comes to him one day, and she tells him that her son has been in his room for a while because he was very sick and he had died. So Elijah goes and prays to God, and he talks to God about, he was like, well, God, why did you do this? The widow and the son have been providing for me. They've been giving me shelter. There's a drought, and they've still been providing me with food. Why did you do this? Now, something very interesting about his conversation with God is that when he was speaking to God, he's speaking to God knowing and believing that God, he had power over the dead. He had power to raise the dead. He had power to take life from others, So this is he's one of the first prophets to do this in the whole Bible. Like, for example, King David, he didn't pray to God believing that God can raise the dead when God took the life of his son from Bathsheba. So we notice here Elijah has a very strong, relationship with God. So what Elijah does next is that he goes and lies on the child 3 times, each time praying. And on the 3rd time, the child comes back to life. So it's crazy, really, really crazy how someone comes back to life. Now, some of you might be asking a really weird question. Hey, why was it that the 3rd time the son came back to life? Why not the 2nd? Why not the 6th? Well, the answer is that the 3 times represent the Holy Trinity. And we do a similar thing in baptism. What do we do similar in baptism?
You put the baby in the water 3 times.
Yeah, you're right. And so just like the son, we are dead. And after we get immersed in the water, or after we get lied on by Elijah, I don't know, on the 3rd time, then we get raised to life. Okay, so chapter 18 is basically, now it's been about 3.5 years since the drought has started. And God tells Elijah, you know what, leave the widow, leave the son, and go and meet King Ahab. So King Ahab is the present king in Israel. And does anyone know what King Ahab is famous for? Okay, I'm looking for an answer from that group over there. They haven't said it. Any guesses? Anything? What do you think King Ahab is famous for? Okay, no one knows? Okay. Oh, someone knows? Okay then, so no one knows. So you guys will get, a new piece of information today. So King Ahab is famous for being a very wicked king in Israel. He really emphasized idolatry. And it wasn't just him. He had an evil wife, and she was very, very wicked, and she killed lots of prophets and priests of God. So this wife was named Queen Jezebel, and we'll get to her later. So Elijah goes to go and find Ahab. Now, at the same time, meanwhile, Ahab is telling his commander in the army, Obadiah, to go out and look for some grass, to feed his horses, because remember there was a drought and the plants are all dying up. So Obadiah goes and looks for these plants, and on his way he finds Elijah. Elijah meets him, and he's like, "Hey, I need to go see King Ahab." Now Obadiah is very confused because Elijah is a wanted man in Israel now, because Ahab and Jezebel blame him for the drought. They don't blame God, they blame him. So he's kind of, on all the wanted posters in town. But Obadiah agrees to him, Okay, Obadiah goes and gets King Ahab. Now, Elijah goes and meets with King Ahab, and while he's talking to King Ahab, he tells him, get all 450 prophets of Baal, and I believe it was 400 prophets of some goddess named Ashereth or something, and every single person in Israel, and meet me on this mountain named Mount Carmel. So it's not Mount Carmel, it's Mount Carmel. And this specific mountain was believed, for the Canaanites and for the pagans and the idol worshippers, that it was a place of dwelling for their gods. So it was kind of like challenging the gods of the pagans. So they go on Mount Carmel, and Elijah makes kind of a bet with Ahab, and he tells him, hey, so both of us are going to do a sacrifice of a bull, and whoever God accepts the sacrifice will be the true God, and we can find out, so all the people of Israel are there to witness that. So this is a very popular story. So yeah, the prophets, the 450 priests and prophets of Baal, go and use their altar and put the bull on it and kind of pray to their God. And their way of praying is very weird. They cut themselves, they scream, and nothing happens, obviously because Baal is not the real God. So Elijah, he starts making fun of them. He's like, hey, where's your God? Is he asleep? Is he in the bathroom? Call louder. Maybe he's busy watching TV or something, right? So the day kind of goes by, and nothing is happening to their sacrifice. So Elijah's like, okay, guys, enough. Let me go. So he goes and builds an altar there with 12 stones and some wood, okay? So the question here is, why did he use 12 stones? You see the number 12 quite often in the Bible. Why do you think 12?
To represent the 12 tribes of Israel?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Who else has an idea? Anyone else?
12 disciples?
Yeah, but the disciples weren't really back in the Old Testament. So, you guys are all, very, very right. And, okay.
12 hours in a day.
That's an idea. Okay. No, so the number 12 actually reoccurs in the Bible and in this part and everywhere else in the Bible, because the number 12, according to Father Tadros Yaub Maloti, represents heaven on earth. So the heaven aspect is the Trinity, 3. Okay, someone held 3 in their hands. Okay, the 3 represents Trinity, the heaven aspect, right? And then someone hold 4 on the other hand. Okay, the 4 corners of the earth, south, east, west, north, right? So that's the heaven and earth aspect. Now multiply them, and what number do you get? Wow, so good at math, everyone. So here we notice that he put the 12 to represent heaven on earth. Yeah, so he builds the altar, and he puts the bull on it, and then he goes and tells his servants to go and fill up 4 pots of water and drench the sacrifice and the altar and everything around it with water. And the servants do that, and then he goes telling them to do it again and again. So now the water has been drenched. Now the sacrifice and the altar and everything around it has been drenched in water 3 times. Elijah then goes and prays to God, and God accepts the sacrifice and burns everything. Fire comes down from heaven, and everything, the water, the altar, the sacrifice, everything is burnt up. So here the people see, hey, you know what? Maybe Elijah's God is real after all. And then Elijah goes and takes the prophets of Baal, the 450 prophets, and goes and executes them. Then he goes and tells Ahab, you know what, Ahab, you should go home and eat because, you know what, I smell the rain coming. The rain's about to come. So this is very crazy because it's been 3.5 years that there's been no rain and some huge miracles just happened. So Ahab starts making his way. Now, Elijah goes with a servant and he tells a servant, hey, go look over at the horizon and check if there's, you know, any rain coming. And while the servant is going to do that, Elijah goes and he bows down and prays to God. Servant returns and he's like, hey, the sky's kind of blank, like there's nothing there. And Elijah tells him, no, go do it again. And Elijah goes and bows down again, and the servant goes and checks. Servant returns. Still nothing, Elijah. Are you sure there's rain? And Elijah tells him, no, go check again. And the same thing happens 7 times. Now on the 7th time, when the servant goes and checks, he's like, oh no, look over there. There's a small, tiny cloud. And he returns, and he's like, hey, the rain is coming. The drought is over. So Elijah, which is kind of crazy, he gets up and runs 16 miles to beat Ahab to his house. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Elijah's very fit. Okay, chapter 19. So everything's, going off very well. Ahab and the people of Israel have returned to God. Everyone's fine. Elijah runs. But it can't last for long now. We still have a couple more chapters left in the book. So Jezebel, remember the evil queen, she really hates God and she wants power. I don't think she really believes in the idols that she worships, but I believe she just wants the power and the political, and the money. So what she does is that she sends a message to Elijah and she's telling him, hey, you killed all my prophets, so I'm gonna kill you, So Elijah runs away to a place. And while Elijah's there, he's very sad, he's very depressed, he's in despair. And he prays to God and he's like, God, take my life, And he's not saying this out of, oh, I'm scared because she's gonna kill me. No, he's saying this because God just performed a great miracle. He brought back water after 3.5 years of drought and he burned up the whole sacrifice. Like, what else do you need to know? God is there. And yet the people of Israel are still following Jezebel's ways. So out of Elijah's whole tantrum, he falls asleep. And he gets woken up by an angel. So the angel's like tapping him and he's like, wake up, Elijah. Wake up, Elijah. Kind of like your mom in the morning. So basically, Elijah does wake up and the angel made him a cake and some water. Well, angels can bake, guys. So the angel gives it to him. He's like, hey, this is from God. You got to eat up. You got to get some strength. So Elijah does so. And then he actually goes on 40 days fasting, kind of like Moses. 40 days fasting, only living on the cake and the water, right? And this kind of fulfills one of the sayings that Christ said. He said, man cannot live on bread alone, but on every word of God, right? So just a little connection there. So 40 days, and he stops on Mount Horeb. And there, God speaks to him, and God speaks to him in a very fantastic way, and we'll see that later. So if you guys want to read a verse, just prepare yourselves. So God speaks to him, and God tells him a couple things, right? And then some of these things are that he tells him to go and anoint 2 kings for Israel and Judah, and he also tells him, get ready to start training a prophet in your place. So who is this prophet? It's Elisha, and the rest of the chapter just explains about how Elijah meets Elisha. Okay, guys, who here wants to read a verse? You've heard me talk, now it's time for you guys to talk. This is about how Elijah speaks to God, and he sees God, well, not really sees God, but he's more of talking to God quotation marks, face to face. You guys don't want to participate? No.
How about you? Anyone want to read the verse? You can.
Sorry. Then he said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord." And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore into the mountains and broke the rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind, and after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake, and the earthquakes a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire, and after a fire, a still small voice. So it was, when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood in the entrance of the cave.
Thank you.
Next one to move is.
Did anyone? Oh, just go back. Can you go back to the verse? Sorry. Thank you. Does anyone not understand that? You don't understand it? Okay, so I'll re-explain it. So basically, Elijah goes and speaks to God, right? And he's on Mount Horeb now. And basically, what happens is that before the Lord like spoke to him directly, you know, there was a really like strong wind, right? And it was crazy. And then after that, there was an earthquake, and then after that, there was a fire. But in none of these was there like God. Like we know God is everywhere, but like God wasn't speaking to him through that. But after all of this, right? After all the chaos, there was, you know, quiet, and then there was God. So I think we can take from that, and we can say, hey, you know what? Maybe like I can't always hear God in all the hustle bustle of the world, in all the chaos of the world, and I need to like, you know, spend time, you know, quietly and peacefully, so I can be able to truly hear the voice of God. Okay, so almost done the book, guys. Please bear with me. So, chapter 20. Really crazy things happen in this book. So basically, Ahab is like living his life, right? You know, he's like, you know, I'm a king, you know. And then all of a sudden, this guy, Ben-Hadad, and he's like the king of Syria, he sends him a message, and he's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to go to your house, and I'm going to take your wives and your children and your money and your gold and your silver. And Ahab's like, I'm not going to go ask anyone about this. I'm not going to go check about this with like my like elders like Rehoboam did. I'm not going to go check it with my friends. No, I'm just going to agree with that. Go ahead, dude. Be peaceful, right? And then Ben-Hadad sends him another message, much more aggressive. And he's like, no, I'm going to like pilgrimage your wives and your children and your money and your gold and your silver. So this is kind of like a warning, I guess. I don't know, really, what was going through Ahab's head. But then he was like, no, change of plan. I'm going to go check with the elders. And he goes, talks with the elders. And the elders are like, don't give in. Don't give him the money and the children and et cetera, et cetera. So Ahab's like, okay, I'm going to go check with, you know, God. And he can't really directly check with God. So he goes and checks with a prophet. And the prophet's like, hey, you know what? You will not agree with him, and you will start a battle with him, and you will win. You will have victory because God is on your side. So Ahab's like, okay, I'm fine with that. And they do get into a battle with Ben-Hadad and the Syrians, and they do win, just like the prophet said. So now Ben-Hadad, instead of, you know, blaming himself and like just accepting the fact that he lost, no, he was like, no, it's all their God's fault. It's all Ahab's fault. And then he starts believing that the God of the Israelites is actually some God of the mountains, and that the only reason they won was because they fought on a mountain. Just a bunch of nonsense and conspiracy theories. So basically, Ben-Hadad is like, you know what, we're going to fight again, but this time it's going to be on plain land. But he doesn't tell Ahab this. He plans on basically, while Ahab is living his life again, the prophet returns to him and he's like, hey, you know what, God told me and revealed to me that Ben-Hadad is planning to attack you in like a month, or in like half a year, right? Like in a while. So Ahab finds out about this and he starts planning ahead. And not only that, but the prophet also tells him that he will win victory again. So Ahab fights against Ben-Hadad with like, I don't know, like pre-knowledge and wins again. Now Ben-Hadad and his servants, you know, they're very hypocritic and they're very blasphemous. And so they're like, hey, you know what? Let's like pretend to be all meek and humble and go back to Ahab and be like, hey, Ahab, you know, we're wearing sackcloth. Please have mercy on us. So they actually do trick Ahab. And Ahab's like, no, you're right. You know, you're like my brothers. I shouldn't kill you and stuff and stuff and stuff. So basically he's like, let's make a treaty and we'll like stay best friends forever. So after this happens, shift your perspective. There's this random prophet, and he's asking someone next to him, hey, hit my face. Person is like, I'm not going to hit your face. And so because he broke God's like commandment, because like God spoke through the prophet so that he can hit the prophet, right? The prophet tells him, hey, once I leave, you're going to get eaten by a lion. Sorry for you. So he does get eaten by a lion, and the prophet goes to another person. And he's like, hey, can you hit my face? And the person, knowing that, you know, this is God asking him to do that, he hits him. And now his like face is like, I don't know, like bruised or something, and he puts on a bandage. So the prophet goes and speaks to Ahab, and he's acting like some random bandaged man. And he talks to him about, we'll see. Okay. So after he talks to him about what we'll see, the king is very sad. We'll see why. Okay. Someone go down. Thank you. Okay, another verse, everyone. Hooray, who doesn't love verses? So, who wants to read this one?
Your servant went out into the midst of the battle, and there a man came over and brought a man to me and said, guard this man. If by any means he is missing, your life shall be for his life, or else you shall pay a talent of silver. For while your servant was busy here and there, he was gone. When the king of Israel said to him, so shall your judgment be. You yourself have decided to it. Then he said to him, thus says the Lord, because you have let slip out of your hand a man whom I appointed to utter destruction, therefore your life shall go for his life, and your people for his people.
Thank you. Okay. So, seems like a pretty harsh punishment, right? Selling Ahab, you know, some pretty crazy things. So that brings us to a question, you know, why did God want him to kill Ben-Hadad? I thought God had wanted us to be peaceful and not like kill captives of war and stuff. And you go, so that brings us to a question. Does God want us to kill captives of war? Does anyone know the answer to this? It's okay if you don't. Saron says no. Maddie says, depends? Okay. Anyone else has another answer or just wants to add on to the answers? So far we have a no and it depends. Anyone over there? So let's say you win against a country in the war, and let's say the king and like some of his followers are left alive. Do you kill them? You keep them alive? What do you do with them? You kill them? Okay. What do you think? Keep them alive? So we have a couple mixed answers here. No, we don't keep them alive? Okay. Well, the correct answer is no. God wants us to be peaceful and not kill others. So, then why does God want us to kill? Well, then why does God want King Ahab to kill Ben-Hadad in this story? Well, guys, do you want to know the answer to your question, or to my question to myself? So, yes. That's not very nice to them. God wants us to be very peaceful to everyone. He doesn't want us to have revenge against others. So guys, we're going to answer the second question that I had. If it is gone now. Okay. It's okay. Then why did God want Ahab to kill Ben-Hadad? Well, Father Theresa Maloti answers by saying Ben-Hadad here in this context represents the devil, the deceptive, and blasphemer. When we have the chance to take every trace of him from our life, take away every trace of him from our life or from that of our children, we would not open the door before him and you. Ben-Hadad here refers to the importance of getting rid of the evil behavior. So Ben-Hadad here was going to cause a problem in the future. And he was already, very, very hateful man, very, he says you're deceptive and blasphemer, and he represents the devil. So when we have a chance in our lives, to get rid of, like bad sources in our lives, like let's say bad friends or unchristian like values, we should take that away as soon as we can. Okay, chapter 21, almost done, guys. Thank you. Okay, so this is the very famous story of, I believe it's pronounced Naboth. That's what Google says. Does anyone know the story of Naboth's vineyard? We'll just skip through that. So Naboth's vineyard, basically Naboth, he's some guy and he has a vineyard, and his vineyard is next to the king's plot, the king's palace. And the king is like, wow, that's a really nice vineyard. I really want that vineyard. And Naboth's like, I can't really give it to you because according to God's commandments, right, in Leviticus, it says that, everyone has an inheritance from their ancestors, right? Like each tribe has their own land and they can't, sell it or give it away. The king is very angry about this and he's like, what do you mean? I really want that land. So he gets a whole temper tantrum, goes to his room and just cries. Now his wife, Queen Jezebel, remember her, very wicked queen, she goes to him and she's like, oh, why are you crying? You can't be crying, you're a king, And then he's like, no, but he won't give me his vineyard. And so she's like, don't laugh. So she's like, don't worry, I'll get to this, I'll get the vineyard for you. So she goes and writes these letters and she sends them to people and she's like, hey, you guys are going to pretend to be accusers and you're going to accuse Naboth of blasphemy against God and against the king. So this, of course, never really happened. He never did that. So anyway, she proclaims a 3-day fast as if saying, this really requires lots of brain power and lots of meditation so we can find out what to do with Naboth. And then on the day where they decide what to do with Naboth, the accusers come up and they're like, no, he blasphemed and he did so and so. And so according to the law, they took Naboth out of the city and stoned him. After this, Queen Jezebel goes to King Ahab and she's like, hey, I got rid of him. Now you get the vineyard. And he's like, hooray, totally not crying for the past couple days. I'm so happy now. I'm going to go own that vineyard now. So this is obviously very, very wrong. So what happens next is that God calls Elijah, our good old friend from a couple chapters ago. And he tells Elijah, go and talk to Naboth's dead. Go and talk to Ahab. Now he goes and talks to Ahab, and what he tells Ahab is that he gives him a very harsh punishment, and not just to him but also to his wife Queen Jezebel. So to Ahab, he's like, what, you're going to be cut off from the kingdom, you won't be king anymore. And to Jezebel, he told her that, if she died in the city, she would get eaten by dogs, and if she died outside of the city, something of the sort. So it was very, very harsh and very, yeah. So because of this, Ahab mourns and repents and wears sackcloth, and he prays to God and he fasts. And because of this, God, has mercy on him. And he tells Elijah to go talk to him. And do you know what he changes the punishment into? You guys are talking. You don't? Okay, let's listen then. He changes the punishment and he says, hey, you know what? Instead of you getting lost or you losing your kingdom, it'll be your son that'll lose the kingdom. Oh, by the way, his son's name is Ahaziah. We'll meet him soon. Last chapter, I promise, guys, I promise. Okay, so chapter 22 is where everything kind of unfolds. So remember Jehoshaphat? So he kind of dies in Maddie's last book, but this was kind of before he dies. So basically, him and Ahab kind of work together, and they're like, hey, you know what? Why are we always fighting? We have this one town, this one city called Ramoth, and Syria kind of has it under captivity. They're kind of controlling it. So we should go and fight Syria and gain the town back. So Ahab's like, hey, you know what? That's a great idea. And they go and send for to acquire of the word of the Lord. So that's, that's a good thing, right? not very good. They sent for 400 prophets, and these prophets are all, very politically like charged, like influenced. So if the king said yes to something, they would completely agree with that. If the king said no to something, they would completely agree with that too, no matter if it is against God's law or not. So all of the prophets say, you know what, go into this battle, go and fight Syria, and you'll totally for sure win. And even some of them start saying, hey, if you take these bull's horns, you'll beat all of these people, and it was very, very materialistic, and it was not coming from God. So Ahab is like, that's a great idea. That's a good sign. Then Jehoshaphat is like, hey, I think you're forgetting one of the prophets. This prophet's name is, do you guys know what the prophet's name is? Another prophet. Okay, guys. His name was Micaiah, I think. I think that's how his name is pronounced, Micaiah. It's on the screen, guys. So Micaiah, he goes up and he's like, hey, I'm ready to talk to Ahab, right? To tell you the true prophecy, right? But the thing is, Ahab doesn't want to listen to Micaiah because he knows, he's saying, oh, Micaiah's always prophesying against me, his whole temper tantrum again. But of course, Micaiah is actually speaking what God says. So Jehoshaphat's like, no, let's just listen to Micaiah. And Micaiah does speak to them about what God says. And Micaiah tells him that they will be defeated and that Ahab will die. And he says also that he saw a vision from heaven of God allowing false spirits to go and lie through the prophets to Ahab. Okay? So God knows about this. This isn't like he agreed. Okay, guys. So, almost done, guys. Almost done. So, Micaiah, he's obviously going against the king's, favor, the king's wishes. So the king's like, no, that's totally lying. And then Zedekiah, his son of Chenana, he comes over and he's one of the false prophets and he goes and slaps Micaiah in front of the king. That's kind of crazy, okay? And then he's like, oh, how could you go against God? How do you know better than me? God speaks to me too. Obviously he doesn't. So anyway, the king is like, you know what, Micaiah, because you're against me, I'm gonna go and put you in jail until I come back safely. I won't spoil that for you. So Ahab and Jehoshaphat go into war, or sort of into a battle against Syria. And basically, Ahab, he's a little shook, from what Micaiah says. So he tells Jehoshaphat, why don't you dress up as me? And, and go in my place. And I'll go and pretend to be one of the other soldiers. So Jehoshaphat does go, and he's like, and people are like, hey, look, it's Ahab, but it's really Jehoshaphat. And they realize it's not Jehoshaphat, and they're just like, oh, we need to go. They realize it's not Ahab, and they're like, we have to go find Ahab. Meanwhile, in this battle, Ahab gets, hold on, guys, someone draws a bow randomly, out of nowhere, and hits Ahab. So Ahab is now dying, blood everywhere, blood is on his chariot, and then he dies. Fun for him. Just as Micaiah said. So now we know, the Micaiah really is a prophet of God and the rest weren't. So they go and bury Ahab, but, to fulfill what God had said in one of the punishments, about how his blood would be, how he would be eaten up by dogs. After the battle, they were cleaning up the chariot at this pool of Samaria, and the dogs licked up the blood from this pool, and then it was also a pool where harlots bathed, according to the Bible. So that's kind of it for Ahab. The book just churns back to Jehoshaphat and it's like, hey, he was a good king, he did really good things. He had peace with the king of Israel. His only problem was that he didn't turn down he didn't break down the worshiping place for pagans. And then the book turns back to Ahaziah, remember Ahab's son, and they say that he's a very wicked king. So that's where the book ends. And that was First Kings. You guys should totally come next time so we can find out about what happens to Ahaziah and Elijah and Elisha and more really cool and awesome people. So that was First Kings. Hope you guys liked it. Thank you for listening.
Can we stand for prayer? Next time we're gonna take Christ in the book for First Kings, but today we're just gonna pray and then go eat. Oh, okay. Make us worthy to pray thankfully. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. In Christ Jesus our Lord.